Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Chris Wickman. I am on the Ingham County Bar Association Board of Directors. I will be hosting today's deliberations with a judicial candidate. If anyone is unfamiliar with us, the Ingham County Bar Association is a voluntary bar association for members of the bar in Ingham County, as well as paralegals, legal assistants, things like that. We seek to provide educational, informational, and social events to individuals who are interested in the legal field in Ingham County. Normally our deliberations are in person at a restaurant, getting to know each other and casual. I'm happy to continue that series with this deliberations with judicial candidates. And we're actually pleased we have a double pleasure today of having both Judge Rick and Judge Ronayne Krause here. Pleasant today. If anyone is interested, they can probably provide contact information for contacting with additional questions. You'll also have the opportunity to ask questions after they both do introductions. If you don't feel comfortable asking your question on video, or if you would like me to ask it for you, feel free to put it in the chat or private message to me. The Ingham County Bar Association does not endorse any given candidate. We're just providing this as a service for informational purposes to those who are interested. So without further ado, I will go ahead and hand it over to, I believe Judge Ronayne Krause is going to do her first introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wickman. Yes, I'm Amy Ronayne Krause. I'm a judge on the Michigan Court of Appeals. I'm actually looking at the group here, and pretty much everyone knows me really well. So I am going to go ahead and give a little background for those that may be watching later. I have been a lawyer since 1988. I went to the University of Michigan and to Notre Dame, but I did marry a Spartan grad, so I've got that going for me here in East Lansing. You know, I know. Good, nice clapping there, Ms. Lake. Thank you. So I really love the law. I love being a lawyer. I loved being an advocate. I was in a private law firm for about 1.5 years. I went from there to being an assistant prosecuting attorney in 2 different counties. One of the counties I ran a sex crimes prosecution unit for 4 years. After that, I ended up working for Attorney General Frank Kelly. I was hired by him in 1997. I'm probably really dating myself here, but that's okay because it's, you know, pretty much all public record here. So 97, I started there. I did health professionals law, administrative law for a short period of time. After that, I was in their criminal division, again, prosecuting cases across the state. So I have practiced in many courtrooms across the state of Michigan. After being in the Attorney General's office for almost 6 years, I was very fortunate to be appointed by Governor Granholm to be a district court judge. That was in 2003. I started a domestic violence court there, dealing with trying to avoid incarceration for folks and instead have them make changes in their behavior. It was a very successful court. We had a very low recidivism rate, and I was very proud of the work that my team did in the district court in Lansing. It was a very, very fulfilling time, and I really appreciated that time there. But I was fortunate enough to then be appointed to the Court of Appeals. I've been here since December of 2010. I was elected in 2012 to fill out a term. I was elected again in 2014 for a full term, and I am up for re-election again this year. I am unopposed. I do have a running mate, Judge Kelly. Mike Kelly is running as well. Neither of us have opposition. And I'm interested to hear if you have any questions about the Court of Appeals. I'm certainly, you know, I could give some overview about how things work there, but that's the introduction for me. I will say that I was a county commissioner also for one term. Back in 2001 and 2002, I was chair of the Law and Courts Committee. I feel as though I understand courts from a lot of different angles, as an advocate, as a trial judge, and also now in the Court of Appeals. I feel as though I've learned many different areas of the law that I hadn't really had to practice or be a part of before. About myself, I'll say this personally. I feel as though I work very hard. I do my best every day, do my best to be fair, do my best to treat everyone with dignity, be respectful to everyone, including my colleagues and sometimes litigants and lawyers. No matter how they treat me, I do my best to be fair, impartial, and like I said, just work as hard as I possibly can. I enjoy this job and I love the law. So those are the things that I'll tell you about me in terms of my professional life. My personal life, again, most everybody here already knows it, but I've been married to the love of my life for the last 20 years. And it's been more than 20 years. We celebrated our 20th year. Instead of going on a trip, we celebrated it at home during COVID. So that was great. No, it was really fun anyway. We had a good time. We did, you know, a really nice dinner and had a blast. But yeah, a little different than what I planned for my 20th anniversary. But and we have 3 rescue dogs that those of you before I ended up getting off Facebook have seen the rescue dogs probably more than you've seen anything of me on my Facebook page. So I did get off of Facebook, and I did want to mention that because there was some concern on the part of the National Association of Women Judges about safety. And after the incident in New Jersey, just a number of people, including our security, just were concerned. And I did have a litigant reach out to me via messenger, who was a litigant in a case, and it was not a threat or anything, but it was still very disconcerting. So at any rate, I'm not on Facebook. If I have a campaign at some point, I will do a Facebook page again, but my email address is in the Bar Journal. I keep my email address there. If you're not writing me about a case or to, you know, say something mean, I'm happy to hear from you. And I love talking with lawyers. So that's there. Almost everybody I think on this call has my cell phone. If you don't, Jackie Dupler has it, I know for a fact. And so does Judge Buchanan. And so does Mr. Wickman. I mean, you know, if you need to get a hold of me because we're not working from the office, you can always call me or email me at any time. I look forward to your questions after I get the opportunity right now to introduce soon to be my colleague on my own bench to be up with us in the Court of Appeals. And I'm so excited to have her join. But more importantly, Judge Rick is a friend. She is a person who I can talk to about anything. She is a person I know who works extremely hard. I'm very, very proud to call her my friend and soon to be colleague on the Court of Appeals. So with me saying all of that, I'm going to turn this over to my good friend, my always friend, Judge Rick.
Thank you very much, Judge Ronayne Krause. A little bit that you may not know about Judge Krause and me is that our friendship dates back to when I was a third-year law student at Detroit Mercy, and she was working in Livingston County in the prosecutor's office there. And I was interning there because my husband at that time, Matthew, many of you know, was a year ahead of me in law school and had started his position as a pre-hearing attorney for the Michigan Court of Appeals in Lansing. And so I took this clerkship in Livingston County because it was an easy way for me to have practice, you know, to obtain some practical experience and at the same time, you know, kind of break up the drive down to Detroit for my final year. But Amy was such a fabulous mentor to me, and I owe so much to her, not only from that time, but then later our paths crossed again when after she left Livingston County, I went to Livingston County. The timing was right, so I was able to join the staff there for 3 years and then go on to the Attorney General's office. And I too was hired by Mr. Kelly a little earlier than Amy, but we met up there again and worked together. I worked in the Attorney General's office under 3 attorneys general. And during that time had worked in the Tort Defense Division, so representing state employees who were sued in the course of their employment. That's where I got my feet wet with the Court of Claims, which is now vested in the Court of Appeals, as you all know. And I worked in the retirement division and then ended up in consumer protection, which was my longest division assignment before then Governor Granholm invited me to join her legal team, and I was deputy legal counsel to Governor Granholm before I took the bench in 2007. But even, I guess I missed something in my chronology of work because I had, upon graduation, Amy was still in Livingston County. And so I took a job with the Hubbard Law Firm for about a year. And it was when Amy left Livingston County, a position opened up. And I always knew I wanted to be a litigator. And it was just a great opportunity to be in court every day. I too love the law. I love being in court. I was amazed the first time I took the bench after my appointment in 2007 that I realized how much I did not listen to the judge. I knew what I had to say. And so when the roles were flipped, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, I just knew when I was cued and needed to speak. So it was kind of, I don't know, an unusual experience, but something that I always really strove to do as a trial court judge was to remember what it was like to be a practitioner. And I know that sometimes judges are detached, and I don't know that they are deliberate in that, but I always wanted to remember what it was like being a practitioner, and I incorporated that into my practice as a trial court judge. I also felt it was important, I think because of my gender, but also because of my role as a parent, that when I took the bench, I made sure that I let all practitioners know that if ever they had a personal conflict, if we had to continue something over, or maybe we were in the midst of a jury trial, that I would be deferential to them, because that was something that I had experienced in a negative sense when I was a practitioner, and that was judges setting timelines or maybe setting hearings without inquiring of the people before them whether or not that would be problematic. And, I'm rather proud of that as a trial court judge. I also recognized it was another epiphany. Not only did I not listen to judges with the, to know their job as well as when I first took the bench, but I also had this epiphany that, oh my gosh, judges are human. When I got my appointment, it's like, whoa, they don't know everything, because I surely don't know everything. And so when I took the bench, I recognized that there were times when, I made the best call I could with the research I did, with the information that practitioners would provide me. But every now and then, I might not have gotten it right. And so I welcomed attorneys filing motions for reconsideration so that they would give me an opportunity, if I really blew it, to correct my action so that, they didn't have to take an appeal. So, those are kinds of the things that I have done up to date. I am seeking the open seat on the Michigan Court of Appeals. I am the only candidate. We worked very hard. Many of you who are on this Zoom also have worked hard on my behalf. We had to collect signatures in order to get my name on the ballot. It took 6,200 signatures pre-COVID. As it turned out, after some federal litigation, I would have only needed 3,100, so half of that number. But by the time I filed, I had amassed well over 70, I think 7,200 was my first filing, and I did 2 supplemental filings. And
it was over 7,400 total for certain.
Yeah. So
I mean, I'll say that if you won't, because I'm going to
thank
brag.
you. Well, you know, you should brag because you helped get those signatures, as did Jackie, as did Alex, as did a number of you. So I'm really grateful. And, you know, we worked really hard from about a year ago to get to this point. But I do not take lightly the fact that it is a position of prestige, and it is one that people have to feel confident in order to vote for me. And so along those lines, even though I am the only candidate, I am doing outreach continually. I welcome questions, not only from any of you, but also from any members of the public. I do have a website, www.judgemichelleRick4micoa.net. And there's a lot of good information about who I am, what I stand for. My campaign slogan was, I am a judge for the people, and I truly believe that we are public servants and that we are in our position to serve the public. And so that's how we came up with that. But I will tell you that my local law enforcement also gave me another slogan, that I'm tough, tenacious, but fair. And I really pride myself on that fairness component. So I want to thank you for you know, being here today. I would certainly welcome any questions that any of you may have. And again, I really thank you. Chris, you're wonderful for setting this up. And Judge Krause, thank you so much for your kind words. You are such a good friend to me. My kids call her Aunt Amy because they love Amy so much. And she just is a gem. And I'm really delighted to you know, have the opportunity to once again be her colleague, and also to be the second woman in the 4th Judicial District of the Michigan Court of Appeals. So
I'm very excited. Yes, you will be that. You will join me. I've been the only woman in the 4th District for 10 years. So it'll be 10 years on December 13th. And I am looking forward to having another woman. Not that there's anything wrong with men, you know, because I like all the male lawyers that are on here are great. and I'll tell you this, you know, number one, I'm voting for you, Judge Rick. I'll tell you that. I have no problem saying that. And I will also say this, that, you know, it is nice to see votes, even if we're not opposed. It's nice to see votes. I agree with Judge Rick that we do need to reach out, and I do stay very connected with all 56 of my counties in terms of try to get to their bar association groups, and I go and speak about what the Court of Appeals does, because quite frankly, most people don't know who we are. And I don't think that should be the case. I mean, I am a big believer in that we should be out there and we should be talking to people and telling them what we do. We do have a lot of work to do, that's for certain, but not so much work that we shouldn't be out and talking to lawyers when they have questions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and say, Mr. Wickman, I don't know if you want to open up the floor for questions or.
Yep. So if anyone has any questions, remember that you can feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can private message me or ask in the chat and I will ask. So it looks like Sandy has a question.
I have a question for Judge Krause. So I have not had a Zoom oral argument yet. I have done them in the trial courts. I despise them. I feel like I'm handcuffed. I can't do my job the way I want to. But I'm wondering how you feel on the other side of it, doing the Zoom oral arguments.
Well, having had you argue in front of me before, Ms. Lake, I can tell you that you are an excellent advocate for your client, for whatever client you're representing. And I will say this, that your style and your demeanor, as I've seen it in the courtroom personally, will come over exactly the same way on Zoom, in my opinion. The thing about Zoom, and I'll tell you this is I think the downfall for lawyers, is that many times, at least for me, I'm seeking, and those of you who have appeared before me know I'm seeking to engage in a conversation. I have read your briefs. I know what's going on. I really want to talk with you about the points that I think are important or that I may not understand, or I may have no questions at all and just want to hear what you think is important. But I'll tell you this, and I think that's a great question. So Ms. Lake, here's my one piece of advice is that it's really hard. What's really hard is, like, right now, I'm trying to look at everybody who's on the screen, who's live on the screen, and see their faces. But trying to get attention, I mean, I literally yesterday sort of had to say, I'm sorry, counsel. Like, I'm trying to ask a question, but, you know, I was doing this. I was kind of going, you know, trying to let them know I had a question, but, you know, they didn't see me, and they're trying to look at 3 different judges on the screen. I get that, and probably look at opposing counsel as well. So that's the one thing, is that trying to keep an eye out. Your eyes sort of have to wander more. I mean, I know we're supposed to look at our camera when we're talking like this, but it's hard for me to do that because I want to look at the people to whom I'm speaking. So you need to be able to do that. I mean, I get that. It's, you know, who cares, quite frankly, Ms. Lake, if later on YouTube, it doesn't look like you're looking in the camera. I mean, maybe right now I should care about that. But for me, the most important thing is that you're keeping an eye on who else might have a question and which judge might have a question. Because if you can notice that and say, oh, you know, Judge Boonstra looks as though you have a question. Did you, that way give him an opportunity to say something or not. Maybe he, you know, wasn't, maybe he was just, you know, scratching his eye. I mean, who knows? But the point is I think that's the biggest difference. But the same rules apply. I get what you're saying is you may not think you're doing as well for your client, but I can tell you, with all the lawyers that I've known, there's some that have argued in front of me on Zoom that I hadn't seen before. So I don't know if it would be the same, but the ones that I know, and I know how they argue, it hasn't hindered them at all. So I can't imagine it hindering you.
So we have a few questions.
It may feel like that, but it's not.
So one question I think that segues directly well from that is, what role do you see technology playing in the Court of Appeals in the near future and after we begin to return to pre-pandemic life?
Well, I can tell you, because I don't think this is any secret, that we're going to be having oral argument by Zoom at least through the rest of the year. So I don't know what the new year will hold, but our arguments the rest of this year are going to be on Zoom. They also will be that if you are endorsed for oral argument starting next month, if you're endorsed for oral argument, you get your oral argument. There's no more of, you know, the judges deciding which cases are going to be held, because we sort of had to do that for a minute. We sort of had to do that for a minute. I mean, for example, in April, we were not ready. We were not ready to go and have oral argument via Zoom for all the panels that were set. But my last 2 sets, we've had oral argument from almost every single case that was set. We're doing so much better. We really are. And the lawyers are understanding, just because you're there, if it's normally a case where you would get up and say, I rely on my brief, you can still say that. You don't have to go ahead and argue just because you're on Zoom. We're not, as much as we don't take offense when you do that in the courtroom, we don't take any offense that it's on Zoom and you decide you're going to rely on your brief. But it's still good to be there because we may have questions. I mean, I had one person that we just allowed to come. I had actually voted that they should have been allowed oral argument, but I was outvoted 2-1, and the person was allowed to come to answer questions. And it's good that she was there because we had a lot of questions for her. So it worked out. But I think being there is important. I think being there, but the transition, more to your point, Mr. Wickman, is that I think we're going to ultimately end up doing more back in the courtroom. However, I also think this brings up an idea that, you know, for example, when we drive up to Marquette to hear oral argument, maybe we won't be doing that anymore. Maybe we will simply have oral argument with lawyers from the UP via Zoom. I don't know. Or the other thing I thought about was potentially when it's bad weather. Or, I mean, for example, when the auto show's in town in Detroit, let's face it, unless you're going to the auto show, you really don't want to be in Detroit because it's just crazy. Opening day of the Tigers, they lost my car keys at the hotel where I was staying in Detroit to go to get to court. Literally, one of the people who worked at the hotel took the general manager's car, drove like a New York cab driver to get me to court on time. It's crazy. So, you know, those days, I think that would be great if we just did it by Zoom. But I think we're going to have a little more flexibility. I mean, for example, if someone, you know, I don't know how people are going to feel and when everybody's going to feel comfortable. And if you don't feel comfortable, if you're able to still appear by Zoom, we haven't discussed all that, but what I can tell you is for right now, in not the transition, but what I can say is for right now, this period of time through the end of the year, we are going to remain on Zoom. So I don't know if that actually answers your question or if you have any other questions based on that.
Well, can I piggyback on that? Because I don't know if any of you have heard the Chief Justice talk about how, you know, we have kind of been catapulted into a new way of dispensing justice. And that for so long, I mean, we really have resisted some of the emerging technologies that could make us more efficient, more reliable, and allow us to administer justice, you know, more swiftly than perhaps we have. And, you know, I certainly support her commentary. She and I have a passion about access to justice, and I know that she teaches classes at U of M. I teach a class by the name of Access to Justice at my alma mater, which is Detroit Mercy. And, you know, one of the concepts that we talk about is how do we bring the practice of law into contemporary times. And if any of you are interested, there's a great book called Rebooting Justice, which talks about things such as you know, whether courts will be operating on virtual platforms and how that allows more people to access the trial court. But I think there are some really great concepts that Rebooting Justice, or there's an author, Richard Susskind, who is a British author and kind of one of the people on the forefront of access to justice commentaries. And, you know, I think we ought to be looking more carefully at some of the concepts that they've been floating for some time, because I think we're there, and it in some respects, it would be a shame to go back. I can tell you, as a trial court judge who has a fair number of self-represented litigants, but I also have a fair number of litigants who have attorneys who are paying their attorneys to drive to go to court and sit in court until their case gets called. It's not efficient, and it is not the best way to operate. And you know, when assuming that we open up and that I, you know, were to be told tomorrow things are back to normal, I would still encourage attorneys and litigants to Zoom in if they want. And I think that there are ways that we really can capitalize on the knowledge that maybe we resisted but have been forced to become familiar with during these times.
And if I could just add on to that as well, speaking of the Chief Justice has actually not too long ago asked me to co-chair a statewide committee where we're going to be dealing with actually this progress because of COVID and going into different technology, dealing with that and transparency and privacy and those kinds of issues. So, you know, I do think that that the Chief Justice is taking that very seriously, and we are going to continue to look at this issue. So I urge anyone to reach out to me or Judge Rick, or, because we're going to be right down the hall from each other. Anytime, if there's any ideas that you have, because we certainly are open to those. And I do think access to justice is extremely important, as Judge Rick has just said. absolutely.
So we have a few questions in chat, but Mr. Plummer wanted to ask a question of both of the candidates.
Hello, folks.
Hello.
I
Hey,
didn't have a chance to put up a background, and I am who I am. So the two candidates know that I don't hide much about myself.
Ever.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The Willie Nelson of administrative law judges. But first of all, I'm proud to be the male minority in this Zoom. There was a time, I'm old enough to remember a time when that wasn't the case, and it was mighty hard to find women lawyers. And of course, we've got great ones right here in this Zoom. I came on because Michelle Rick and Judge Amy Ronayne Krause, I've known for years. I think very highly of them, their work ethic, their intelligence, and their fairness. And, if there was anybody that was coming on to try to decide about their vote, I just couldn't say enough to encourage them to vote for these two fine women. I am an administrative law judge. So when you were talking about access to justice, I have case types like Section 8 housing cases, where let alone not being able to afford an attorney, many of those people couldn't afford the drive to come to a court. And I hear virtually all those cases by telephone. Maybe we'll be able to switch to Zoom at some point. But you can communicate without visuals if you need to. And Barb Brown did a training for administrative law judges hearing driver's license cases about how to judge credibility over the telephone, and it was quite effective. And I'm here to tell you that can be done. My question to both Judge Rick and Judge Krause is, I know your backgrounds, so I know your concerns, and I want to talk about implicit bias for a bit. We all try our best. I mean, if you look, this is a pretty Caucasian Zoom we have going here, and I don't think it's by anybody's design. That's just the way it worked out. But I look at implicit bias, and it's kind of like COVID positive people without symptoms. You don't know you have it, but you're going around infecting people and infecting what you do. And the last thing I would ever want to do, I mean, we all have our brags, and both these judges, there's not a racist bone in their body. Like myself, I went to an all-white school, and I was the only member of the NAACP at that school in high school. It goes back. I marched in some of those marches that you see from back in the 60s. I'm old enough. But I don't know if the Court of Appeals is working on its own implicit bias. I guess I have a two-part question to ask each of you. One is, are there plans at the level of the Court of Appeals to try to do something internally about recognizing implicit bias and how to deal with it? And do you see appeals coming to you that have the, I don't want to be offensive, but the odor of bias? And if so, what, if anything, can you do about that? So, loaded question for both of you. Thank you for your time, and go get them, ladies.
Judge Rick, are you okay if I start? All right. Let me say this, in terms of training for implicit bias, dealing with implicit bias, I think that depends on the judge. I wouldn't say that we've had a training on implicit bias that has been court-wide. I wouldn't be opposed to that, of course. I think that's a good thing. I do think that we have to all think about that. I certainly don't, I don't think anyone's immune from it. I don't care who you are. I just don't think you're immune. I mean, and when you say it's like a person walking around with COVID and they have no symptoms, that's a perfect analogy. So, what I want to say is I wouldn't be opposed to that. That's something I think I will bring to the, we have an educational component of the court. I think I will bring that idea to them. We have had training at some of the Supreme Court seminars on that issue. It's something you have to sign up for, though. It's one of many different options. So it's not something that we've all had. I think that's a really good idea, Peter, or I guess it should say Judge Plummer. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you being so kind about your work with Michelle and me. Very, very much appreciated. Let me say this about appeals that may have bias in them. Here's a great example. I had a case, and it dealt with employment discrimination. And there were women that said they were being discriminated against by this particular gentleman. And anyway, long and short of it is, I ended up writing this opinion, and I had no idea that the person that they were suing was African American. And it turned into a big deal. I mean, I basically said, hey, I don't think this guy, and I said it, as you all know, a lot fancier, but I basically said this. I said, hey, I don't think that there was any gender bias here. I said, from everything I can tell, this guy just shouldn't be a manager. I mean, he was terrible. Well, it turned into this big thing because he was African American, and then I feel terrible, and I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, I didn't know he was African American. I mean, it didn't cross my mind. When I have a defendant who's in prison, I don't look them up on Otis. I don't know what they look like. I don't want to know. I don't have to know unless it's part of the case and it makes a difference. I had a case where the plaintiff was an African American woman, and I knew that because the police officer had videotaped the entire, audio and videotaped the entire exchange. So I did know. And I will tell you that, the bias can be one of two ways. I mean, there are times where you think, oh, this police department, and it was a white police officer, and this is a black person being arrested, your initial thought would be, could be, oh, I wonder if something went wrong here. And when it's all on video and audio tape, that's very helpful. So, I mean, that's changed a lot of, having to make a judgment call because it's flat out in front of you. I don't know if I'm actually answering your question, Judge Plummer, but I do think that it is something that we have to think about. And I think to not think about it is not taking your job seriously. But I'm going to turn it over to Judge Rick and see what else she'd like to add.
Thank you, Judge Krause. So I'm an officer in the Michigan Judges Association, and a couple of years ago, our annual conference focused on implicit bias. So we offered training for everyone in attendance, and we had a pretty good crowd. Judge Krause is right, though, that people who are, you can't force them to attend training like that. And there are people who I think mistakenly believe that by acknowledging that one has implicit bias, and we all do, that somehow there's it's a character flaw, when in fact it's human nature. Implicit bias takes place because our brain maps out determinations without us stopping the brain along the way and challenging the brain. Why did you think that? Why did you go there? And it happens to everybody. But, there is a learning curve, I think, and I think that we are mastering that, particularly today, where we have been confronted with atrocities that have been very visual because of video cameras. George Floyd comes to mind immediately. And look at the outpouring of acknowledgement that has taken place. I would gather that probably claims that might otherwise have been dismissed out of hand, that courts, whether it be trial courts or appellate courts, might take a step back and look a little differently at allegations that have been made, given what we have experienced. I will tell you that I am the state chair and a district director for the National Association of Women Judges. We are a national organization. Judge Krause belongs. I hope Judge Buchanan will be joining us. And any of you could actually join as well. Alex Russick was a panelist. We did an NAWJ event a year ago, and he was kind enough to be, on the forefront of assisting us in organizing that. But NAWJ has a platform where we want to see diversity. We want to see a reflection of the community in terms of the composition of the bench as well as the bar. And so one of the programs that has become a flagship program and we have promoted in Michigan is a program called Face of Justice, where we encourage youth to see themselves as a face of justice. And we target high school youth in government and social studies classes. And, we do that deliberately because we know that if you don't see yourself a certain way, or if you don't have that connection with someone who is like you, then you probably would be dismissive in terms of, oh, I could never do that, right? Because judges are all look this way and act this way. So that's one of the programs that NAWJ has for youth. We also continue our programming, and a number of you have attended Mentor Jet programs at the various law schools. And that too is not so much a pipeline program, but rather it is an opportunity for law students to make connections with judges and with practitioners so that they can be inspired. And in some instances, mentorships have formed past the evening of the event. And, so those topics of diversity, of inclusion, of implicit bias are topics very near and dear to my heart. And in my Access to Justice class, we have Mark Fancher, who is an attorney who does racial justice for ACLU. He comes in and talks to the class about the experiences that he's had personally as well as professionally on the topic of racial justice. We've also begun introducing litigants who have been exonerated either through the Innocence Project or through Wayne County. And those are important conversations that we need to be having and challenging one another. Again, it's kind of that combination implicit bias, and in some instances, perhaps things have been more explicit. But these are difficult topics. And here's the last thing that I'll say about this, Judge Plummer, and that is, I am a person who likes to, be like you and pick up arms, get involved in the walk and the like. I think it's very powerful. But one of the other things that I have come to appreciate is that I also just need to be a good listener, because when it comes to implicit bias, I might not have any idea that an assumption that I've made or a word that I've used or a phrase that I've used might be offensive to someone because I am not of their culture. I am not of their ethnicity. And so I think, we need to be listening a lot more to really get the perspective that we have obviously overlooked. And so that's my mission right now, become a good listener.
That's, you know, I think that's so perfect. I was just going to add this, is that, you know, there have been times where, and it doesn't, this section of the population doesn't matter, but there were times that I would be as a trial judge, wondering why this person wouldn't look at me. I mean, I'm trying to have a conversation, they won't look at me, and I'm like, why aren't they looking at me? What, like, I'm like, hello, look at me. And, you know, it was a sign of disrespect to look at me because I was higher than they were. Well, quite frankly, I never sit around and think I am higher than anybody. So I didn't get it. And you know, was that, I mean, that's a different kind of bias, but it was, I finally had to be told, you know, that is a sign of respect. And I said, okay, get it. On it, won't ever ask people to look at me again. If they're not looking at me, I'm just going to let them not look at me. But I had to learn that. I mean, I wasn't used to that. I mean, I can't remember ever having a conversation with anyone on this screen where I wasn't looking them in the eye. I mean, it's just how we talk. So there's that. And then the diversity and inclusion part, I think too, I wanted to add, there's the Women's Lawyers Association of Michigan has just started a diversity and inclusion committee. And I am in part of that committee, and I'm going to be working with that too. So hopefully, you know, I think we just need to keep talking about this and not ignoring it. So Judge Plummer, I appreciate you bringing this up today because I think it's a very important topic.
Thank you. And having asked a question and gotten wonderful answers, and I got to tell you, Judge Rick, I didn't know that side of your activity. So I'm very impressed by both of you, but you seem to be way ahead of the pack in dealing with this, especially.
Sure.
But I have to chair a meeting at 7, so I need to go prepare. So I'm going to run off. But thank you both. Best of luck. It's great to see you and everybody else on the screen, Ms. Lake and all. Have a wonderful evening. And I'll break stride and say, God bless you all. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. So that actually, it is definitely an important topic. I appreciate you guys addressing it because we actually had a similar, but I think somewhat slightly different question in chat that I was going to ask next. How do you see the recent discussions on racism affecting your practice as a judge or generally on the Court of Appeals?
You want to start this time, Judge Rick?
Sure. You know, I think I have been mindful of those concerns, but I can say it does give me greater insight, cause to pause. I had recently an occasion where I had an individual, a young man of color from Lansing, who had been placed on probation, and it became, he was brought in on a probation violation, and it seemed to me he had HIDA. He was a good kid, and the violation was not significant, but my concern for him was that we needed, instead of keeping him on probation and potentially losing HIDA down the way, he was very fragile, that we needed to connect him with resources and say, you know what, guy, we're just keeping the HIDA in place and we're discharging you from probation. And you know, I say that because you know, the topic that we're talking about also leads us, or could lead us, to a conversation about mass incarceration and the use of particularly criminal laws that relate to drugs as being a tool to potentially over-incarcerate people of color. And another book I'll throw out, because I'm a teacher, is Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. And that is a very insightful read about how even the best of us in the system, with implicit bias, if something happens to a person of color that brings them to the criminal justice system, how there can be a kind of a compounding of these implicit biases that perhaps result in what arguably could be an unjust result for them, particularly if it leads to, incarceration in a prison facility. So, I try to be mindful of that, but I also, recognize, particularly in my community, I have a great relationship with law enforcement, and these are people who are my neighbors, who, I know are parents. They work exceptionally hard. And, it's a tough topic, but I really think that now is a time for us all along the way, to assess what our expectations are, and what really is truly a just outcome. If that answers the question. I'll let Amy do a better job of answering the question, Judge Krause.
I doubt I will do a better job, Judge Rick, but I will say this: at the Court of Appeals level, the issue that we have is we are a court of record, and it's what happened on the record. It is a decision usually by a lower court judge where we have to decide, did the trial court judge make an error or not? Because truly we are an error correcting court. We are a correction court, a court of correction. So there are some things that when it comes to implicit bias, there's not going to be a way for me to know what the implicit bias may be or may have been of the trial court. My thing that I say as many times as I can, and since this is being recorded, hopefully someone else will see this too besides the group on here, and that is, you need to make a record. And sometimes that's really uncomfortable. Believe me, as a practitioner, I was in front of judges that made it very uncomfortable for you to make a record. In fact, tried to cut you off or leave the bench and not want the record made because they knew that they were not being fair. And I don't mind saying that. I had to make the record and say what I saw and say what was going on and say how I didn't think it was right, whatever the case may be. And it's very difficult, particularly when you are in that county very often, and it's a judge, you don't want to call it out because you don't really want to be the person who says something bad about the trial judge. And it's not about them. You have to understand, if they're doing something that's wrong, most judges, not all, most judges want to do the right thing. I mean, for me, it's kind of the same thing when we get a motion for reconsideration. I know that there are probably many judges on my court that, it's hard to look at yourself and say you're wrong. I personally think, because one of my idols was a judge in Washtenaw County who he would reverse himself regularly on a objection, even be an objection, and he'd say sustained, and I'd say, well, Your Honor, and the court rule, all due respect, says blah blah blah, and he'd pull the book down, he'd look at it, he'd say, oh no, you're right, I reversed myself. It's I think that you need to make the best record you can so that we understand if there's some sort of implicit bias. The part about whether or not the judges on our court have that is a separate issue from what's going on in the lower court. So you need to make sure the trial judge, the trial court record is what you want it to be, so that we can look at whatever issues you think are important for us to review as an appellate court judge. I still think, though, all of us as judges, as people, lawyers, all of us have to think about our bias. I remember having a conversation with an attorney once, and I brought up my dentist, And, you know, without thinking, the other person started calling my dentist a he. Now, whether or not it was a he, you know what I mean? It happens. I mean, people just, oh, the dentist is a man. And, you know, I don't think that applies to everybody anymore, but I think that we all need to think about all different parts where we make presumptions about all kinds of things. And the other thing that I'm going to say to lawyers that I think is important, and it's important about me, is I am not going to take anything personally. If you think I made a mistake, I would rather have you tell me in a motion for reconsideration than and even if it's an unpublished opinion, go around being wrong. I don't want that to happen. If I made a mistake, I'm a human being and I want to get it corrected. I want the right thing to happen. So please know that I think that all of us really do want the right thing to happen. So again, I'm not sure that's completely answering your question, Mr. Wickman, or whoever asked the question, but I just wanted to make those points. I think they're important.
Very good. Remember, everyone, if you want, you can unmute yourself and ask questions. I do have one other question from chat that I'll ask now, but we are running low on questions in chat. So what do you hope to accomplish during your upcoming term as a judge on the Michigan Court of Appeals?
That goes to Judge Rick first.
First of all, am very excited about the fact that assuming that the election goes away, that I hope that I will be joining the Court of Appeals. I hope to bring a fresh perspective, and I also think that, like Judge Krause, having been a trial court judge, that it will give me the opportunity to view things through the lens of a trial court judge as well as a practitioner. I think that sometimes if people don't have that trial court experience when they are, become appellate judges, they miss out on a component that I think really enhances their ability to do the job that they have before them. I am also very excited about the idea that with my new responsibilities, that there will be new opportunities. Judge Krause has talked about several endeavors that she's undertaking, and I look forward to have similar opportunities on a broader scale beyond my mere community to engage on topics that are of interest and I think great importance. So Judge Krause, to you.
One of my goals has been on this bench is to have our schedule be a little more, how do I want to say this? Right now we set half our docket at 10 and half our docket at 11. I am hoping that with Zoom, what we have done is we have started having a docket at 10 and then at 1. So there's actually a break. And I think that is good in terms of scheduling so that a lawyer's not waiting too long. To me, again, as Judge Rick has already pointed out, to me, having a lawyer wait is absolutely the worst thing that can happen. When I was on the district bench, and those of you may remember having my JA come out, if we had an 8:15 motion and I got there at 8:18, I already had a call into my JA to go out and apologize at 8:15. Even though I was going to be on the bench 3 minutes late, I made sure there was an apology, because the thing I hated as a lawyer was waiting for judges. I don't want people to wait for me, ever, at all. So this new schedule with the 10 o'clock and the 1 o'clock has, I think, really helped. And I think it's helped the judges too, because quite frankly, I've never understood why we didn't take a break to eat. I mean, I'm all for, I'm trying to eat healthy food, trying to lose some weight during this whole thing. I get that, but I got to eat something, and not having lunch has just never really made sense to me, because I think sometimes people get a little bit, they're not as patient if they haven't had a break. So I'm hoping that this will continue, because I do think it helps everybody, the judges and the litigants. So, you know, my hope is this, the whole scheduling issue, I'd like to see that change. I'm not the chief judge, so I don't get to make that decision, but I have been talking with folks about that idea that this actually seems to be working. People seem to like it better, the lawyers and the judges. So that's one of the things. And the other part, I mean, for me, my goal every term on this bench is the same as my goal has been every day since I've been a lawyer, which is that when you're in the law, it isn't just that, you know, we are to do justice. You know, justice really is our only calling. I mean, equal justice under law, as it says on the United States Supreme Court, is my thing. My goal every day is to make sure that there's equal justice under law. So my goal stays, that part of my goal stays the same. The other parts that I can make changes about, I do little bits as I can, but that is always my goal.
Thank you both. Were there further questions for either of the judges? Remember that you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask them, or you could go in and ask them in chat or message me privately in chat. I am not.
I just have a comment.
There we go.
I just want to thank both of you on behalf of the ICBA for all of your support and everything that you do for us. I think we have the most spectacular, involved judges in the state. And I'm not qualified to say that, but I'm going to anyways, because of all the time that you guys devote to us. And I can't tell you how much we appreciate it, and how I think our legal system in general just benefits from having that open conversation between judges and practitioners. And so we greatly appreciate it, and we thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Sandy. I'm so happy to be here.
It's definitely that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? I am not seeing any right now, but it's not too late. Anything either of you judges would like to say before we go ahead and close out the recorded portion?
I'm going to say this, just vote. Everyone needs to vote.
Fair enough.
I'm honored to be with you, to call you all friends, and I want to thank you for taking time out. I know these are long days, especially with Zoom. We all get zoomed out. So thanks for being here and for showing interest and for giving the hospitality that you've extended.
Exactly. And for being here on for two folks that don't have any opposition, but at least to be here for us and talk with us, because I think it's important that Judge Rick and I are here, and I think it's important that you're all here too. I really appreciate it, and I am honored to be a part of the Ingham County Bar Association, as I know Judge Rick is as well.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. If you have questions for the candidates, always feel free to contact them directly, or you can always contact me and I can forward any questions on. Thank you all for being here again. And we hope everyone's time was worthwhile. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. So thank you all for being here.